I came home on a Tuesday afternoon smelling like vendor invoices and fried onions, the way I always did, after a full day running the books for Whitmore Family Catering. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and headed to my bedroom to change. The small wooden jewelry box my grandmother Rose had given me sat on my dresser where it always did. White pine, brass clasp, a chip on the left corner from the time I dropped it, moving into my first apartment. I knew that box the way I knew my own heartbeat. I opened it without thinking. My grandmother's engagement ring was gone. Not misplaced, not tucked under the velvet tray. Gone. The little satin cushion it had rested on for 9 years was empty, flattened, cold. I stood there for a full minute, not breathing. Then I walked downstairs. My mother, Gloria, was at the kitchen table folding napkins for a weekend event. My father, Frank, sat across from her reading the paper. I held up the empty jewelry box. "Where is it?" I said. My mother did not look up right away. When she did, her face carried that expression I had seen my entire life, the one that said she already knew this moment was coming and had decided how it would end. "Emma needed it," she said, "for the engagement." Just like that. 6 words. Like the promise they had made to me when I was 7 years old meant absolutely nothing at all. I sat down at that kitchen table because my legs stopped working. My father put his paper down. He had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, not guilty, just uncomfortable the way a man looks when he has signed off on something and does not want to explain it out loud. "Your sister is getting married," he said. "A ring like that should be on a bride's finger, not sitting in a box." I had spent 22 years watching that ring sit on my grandmother's hand, then 7 years watching it sit on that cushion after she passed, waiting for the day it would be mine. My grandmother Rose had held my 7-year-old hand in both of hers and said, "Nora, when your time comes, this ring goes to you." She had said it clearly, in front of my parents, in front of a room full of family. It was not a vague wish. It was a promise. I reminded them of that right there at that table. My mother set down a napkin and smoothed it carefully. "You know how Emma gets," she said, as if that explained everything. As if Emma's feelings were a weather system nobody could control, and the rest of us just had to prepare for rain. I asked if anyone had thought to ask me first. My father picked up his paper again. That was his answer. I sat in that kitchen for 10 more minutes waiting for one of them to say sorry. I need to tell you something about Emma before I go further, because none of this makes sense without it. Emma was 4 years younger than me. She was the daughter my parents had always wanted and somehow never admitted they were waiting for. She was loud, bright, and magnetic in the way certain people are, the kind that makes every room turn toward them without trying. I did not resent her for that. What I resented was what my parents did with it. Everything in our house orbited Emma. Her performances, her heartbreaks, her moods. When Emma wanted something, the family mobilized. When I wanted something, they handed me a list of reasons to want something else. I had worked inside the family catering business since I was 19. I started washing dishes, moved to prep, taught myself bookkeeping, and eventually became the person who kept the entire operation running. I managed the accounts, handled the vendors, negotiated contracts, trained staff, and covered shifts when people called out sick. My parents collected the profits and gave Emma a weekly allowance just for showing up to smile at clients. I never complained. I told myself loyalty had a payoff. That being quiet and capable was its own kind of power. Drop a comment right now if your family ever made you feel invisible. Tell me where you're watching from tonight and what time it is where you are, because this story is only just beginning. Emma got engaged to Marcus Dale on a Saturday in October. He was a financial consultant, polished and measured, though I did not know him well yet. The engagement party was held at our parents' house, and my mother outdid herself with the decorations. Flowers everywhere. A catered spread our family business had prepared. I spent the morning setting up and the evening refilling platters while my mother stood beside Emma showing off the ring to every guest who walked through the door. My grandmother's ring. The one promised to me. I watched it catch the light on Emma's finger from across the room while I restacked cocktail napkins. A neighbor named Brenda whispered, "What a beautiful ring. Is that an heirloom?" My mother beamed. It belonged to my mother. Perfect for Emma's big day. She did not mention me. She did not say the ring had been promised to someone else first. She did not once glance in my direction. I smiled and carried a tray of appetizers to the back table. I had learned very young how to make my face do one thing while my chest did something completely different. But that night, standing in the kitchen of the house I had basically kept afloat for years, something shifted deep inside me. It was quiet, almost cold. Not anger exactly, more like a door closing for the very last time. And when a door closes that quietly inside a person, it tends to stay shut forever. Marcus's mother, Helen Dale, arrived 3 weeks after the engagement party. She was 67, recently widowed with a bad hip and a mind sharp as a kitchen knife. Emma had warned us she was a lot. What Emma actually meant was that Helen said what she thought without apologizing for it, which apparently made her difficult in Emma's opinion. I found it genuinely refreshing. She came to Sunday dinner and within 20 minutes had assessed every person at the table with the quiet precision of someone who had spent a lifetime reading rooms. She sat across from me and asked what I did. I told her I ran operations for the family business. She asked what that specifically meant. I told her honestly. Client management, vendor contracts, scheduling, payroll, accounts receivable, accounts payable. She nodded slowly. "So you run it," she said. "Basically," I replied. My mother laughed lightly and said, "Nora keeps things organized." Helen looked at my mother, then at Emma, then back at me. She said nothing else right then. But after dinner, while everyone settled in the living room, she found me in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. She stood in the doorway watching me for a quiet moment. "You are the one who actually keeps this family together, aren't you?" she said. It was not a question. I kept stacking plates and did not answer, but I felt it land somewhere deep in my chest. Someone had finally seen it clearly. Helen's health was not good. Her hip made walking painful, and she had a heart condition requiring regular monitoring. Marcus and Emma were both working full-time and could not always be available, so the responsibility of checking on Helen fell to whoever was willing. Emma went twice in the first 2 weeks, both times cutting visits short because she found Helen exhausting. After that, Emma stopped going entirely. I started going instead. It was not a grand gesture. Marcus had asked if someone could check on her. My parents had looked at me, and I said, yes, because that is what I always said. But something unexpected happened. I genuinely liked Helen. She was funny, in a dry, careful way. She had traveled widely and had photographs covering one entire wall of her living room. We would sit in her kitchen drinking tea from mismatched cups while she told me stories about places I had never been. She asked about my life in return. Real questions, not polite surface ones. She wanted to know what I dreamed about and whether I was truly happy inside. I realized, sitting in her warm kitchen on those Wednesday and Friday afternoons, that not one person in my actual family had ever asked me those questions. Not once in 40 years. I started looking forward to those visits more than I expected. So did Helen. And Emma noticed every single time I went, which meant that trouble was already forming just below the surface, quiet as water finding a crack in stone. Emma pulled me aside after church one Sunday in November. She had that look she got when something had bothered her long enough that it had curdled. "You do not have to keep going over there every week," she said. "Marcus and I have it handled." I reminded her that Marcus himself had asked me to help. "I know what Marcus said. I am saying I do not need you inserting yourself into my future family." Inserting myself. I was doing grocery runs, managing medications, and driving Helen to cardiology appointments. I was doing the work Emma had quietly walked away from. I told her I would step back if that was what she truly wanted. She said she would handle it herself. She did not. By Wednesday, Marcus had called me twice, asking if I could check on his mother. I went. Helen was waiting by the window when I arrived, which told me she had been watching from my car. "I thought you were not coming anymore," she said. I told her I had only been delayed. She nodded and said quietly, "Your sister does not like that. We get along." I said I was sorry about that. Helen poured the tea and said, "Do not be, the right people find each other. That is just how it works." I did not know then how much those words would mean in the months ahead. But something about the way she said them told me she already did. December came fast. Helen's health dipped sharply in the cold, and her doctor adjusted her medications twice in 1 month. I was tracking the changes, calling the pharmacy, making sure she ate properly. Marcus was grateful in the genuine, exhausted way of a man doing his best from a distance. Emma had stopped asking about her future mother-in-law entirely. One afternoon in mid-December, I arrived to find Helen sitting at her kitchen table with a small velvet pouch in front of her. She was very still. Not sad exactly. More like a person who has made a decision and found peace with it. She pushed the pouch toward me when I sat down. "I want you to have this," she said. I did not open it. I asked what it was. "My wedding ring. I wore it for 41 years. I pushed it gently back. I told her I could not take it, that it should go to Emma, that Emma was marrying her son." Helen left the pouch where it sat. "Emma does not want it," she said quietly. She told Marcus she would prefer something modern. She paused. "My ring is not flashy. It is not modern, but it is real." She looked at me steadily. "I know who the real people are in this family, Nora. I have known for a while now." I sat there with my hands in my lap and felt the whole world tilt sideways. "Stay right here with me, because what came next changed everything." I did not take the ring home that day. I told Helen I needed time to think. She understood. She placed the velvet pouch back in the drawer beside the refrigerator and said it would be there when I was ready. I drove home, turning the weight of her offer over in my mind. Not just a ring, a declaration. A clear statement about who she saw as real and who she did not. I knew what accepting it would cost me. Emma would see it as war. My parents would take Emma's side automatically, the way they always had. But I also thought about my grandmother's ring now, sitting on Emma's finger. About 22 years of showing up at the family business and being treated like furniture. About every question Helen had asked me that my own mother had never once thought to ask. I did not make the decision that night. I went home, made dinner alone, and let it sit in my mind like a stone in still water. Meanwhile, my father called the next morning to complain about a vendor invoice filled in the wrong folder. Not a hello, not a how are you, just a problem for me to fix. I fixed it. Then I opened a blank notebook and wrote one sentence at the top of the first page. It said, "How much of yourself have you given away for free?" I stared at that sentence for a very long time. I want to stop and ask you something right now. Have you ever been so deep inside something that you forgot you were allowed to leave? Drop your city in the comments and tell me what time it is where you are watching. Have you ever given everything to a place and gotten almost nothing back? Because that was exactly where I was that January. Whitmore Family Catering had been running for 26 years. My father, Frank, started it out of our home kitchen when I was a teenager. By the time I was in my mid-30s, it had 12 full-time employees, 3 major corporate contracts, and 2 venue partnerships, bringing in steady bookings year-round. What my parents told people at dinner parties was that Frank built it from nothing. What they never mentioned was who kept it running every single day. I had never drawn a proper salary. I was listed as a part-time consultant, so my father could justify paying me a fraction of what any outside manager would have earned for the same work. I had told myself it was a family investment, that one day the business would be mine and the quiet sacrifice would mean something. That January, I sat down with the payroll records and did the real math for the first time. In the previous 3 years alone, I had been underpaid by a conservative estimate of $68,000 compared to market rate for my actual role. $68,000. Ellen passed away on a Thursday morning in late January. Marcus called me first. Not Emma, me. He was crying in the contained way men do when holding themselves together for practical reasons. He said she had gone peacefully in her sleep and had not been in pain. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long while after that call ended. I had known it was coming. Her doctor had told us in December her heart was weakening faster than expected. But knowing does not always make receiving easier when it finally arrives. I went to the house that afternoon to help with arrangements. Emma arrived an hour after me, red-eyed and quiet. For a short while, shared grief made us just 2 people in a sad kitchen, and the distance between us did not exist. Then Marcus sat us both down. He said his mother had left written instructions about her belongings. Clear, witnessed legal instructions prepared with her attorney. He read them steadily. Most items went to Marcus, a few to longtime friends, and her wedding ring, the one in the velvet pouch in the kitchen drawer, was to go to Nora Whitmore. He said my name clearly and looked at me when he said it. I did not look at Emma, but I heard her sharp exhale. It was a very specific kind of exhale. Not just surprise, it was the sound of someone deciding that something which had just happened to them was someone else's fault entirely. The drive home from Marcus's house was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I kept both hands on the wheel and the radio off. The velvet pouch was in my coat pocket. By the time I pulled into my parking space, my phone had already started ringing. Emma called twice before I got through my front door. I let it ring. She texted next. A long one. I read it standing in my hallway, still in my coat. She said I had manipulated Helen, that I had deliberately spent more time with her to influence her final decisions. That I had stolen a ring, obviously meant for the woman marrying her son. She used the word stolen 3 times in 4 sentences. I put the phone face down on the counter and stood very still. Helen had made her decision freely, with legal documentation witnessed and prepared before her death. There was nothing to argue on paper, but Emma was not arguing about paper. She was arguing about power. The next morning, my mother called. She said the family was asking me to give the ring to Emma as a gesture of goodwill. Then my father called and used the phrase "the right thing to do." Neither of them mentioned that Emma already wore my grandmother's ring. Neither of them asked how I was doing after losing Helen. That was the moment I stopped waiting for them to see me. That was the moment I started planning. I kept both rings. Let me say that plainly. I kept Helen's ring and did not ask for my grandmother's ring back, not yet. I was not ready to fight that battle on their terms. What I was ready to do was far quieter and far more permanent. I went into the office the following Monday and told my father I was resigning. He stared at me like I had announced I was moving to another planet. "You cannot just quit," he said. "The Henderson account renewal is in 3 weeks." I told him I was giving 2 weeks' notice as a professional courtesy and would prepare a complete handover file. His face cycled through disbelief, irritation, and something that looked very much like real fear before landing back on irritation. He called my mother. She came to the office and cried. She said this was all about the ring. I told her calmly that I was leaving because I had not been paid fairly for 22 years. I wished them well. She cried harder. Emma called that same evening. "You are destroying this family," she said. I said nothing. What Emma did not know, what none of them knew, was that during my 2-week notice period I had been doing something they had never seen coming. I had copied everything. Every client file, every contract, every pricing sheet, every vendor relationship, every weakness. I had it all, and for the first time in years I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. My last day at Whitmore Family Catering was a Friday. I cleaned my desk, handed over the files I wanted them to have, and shook my father's hand. He held it a moment longer than necessary and looked at me. For 1 second, I thought he might say something real. Something that acknowledged the 2 decades I had spent in those offices keeping his dream alive while my own sat in a drawer. He shook my hand and said, "Do not come back asking for your job when this does not work out." That was it. I walked out. I sat in my car in the parking lot for exactly 4 minutes. I did not cry. I opened my laptop and began building the business plan I had been sketching in my notebook for 3 weeks. I already had a name: Clean Slate Catering and Events. I had a list of 15 clients, all currently under contract with Whitmore. I knew what they paid and what they wished they were getting. I knew the vendor relationships that drove the best margins and the operational weaknesses that had caused complaints in the previous year. I had not taken a single document from the office. I had simply remembered everything I had spent 2 decades building myself. I drove to my apartment, made coffee, and opened my laptop on the kitchen table. I had real work to do now, and for the first time in years, every bit of it was entirely for myself. The first month running Clean Slate from my kitchen table was equal parts exhausting and electric in a way I had almost forgotten was possible. I woke at 5 every morning with a list in my head and went to bed at midnight, still turning through the next day's tasks. I registered the business, opened a commercial bank account, and reconnected with 3 vendors I had worked with personally for years. 2 of them extended favorable terms without hesitation because they trusted my judgment. I also reached out to a former colleague named Patrice who had left Whitmore 6 months earlier after a serious disagreement with my father over scheduling. Patrice was talented, reliable, and quietly furious about how she had been treated on her way out. She came on board in my 3rd week without any hesitation at all. Within 30 days, I had a functional operation, a professional website, and a pricing structure meaningfully better than what Whitmore was offering its clients. Then I made my first real move. His name was Mr. Harmon, and he ran a regional insurance firm that had been a Whitmore client for 9 years. He had mentioned to me twice in passing that the renewal terms felt too rigid for his growing needs. I called him on a Tuesday morning, introduced myself in clean slate, and asked for 30 minutes. He gave me a full hour. By the end of that hour, he had signed a letter of intent. The Harmon Group departure hit my father like a physical blow. He called 3 hours after their formal termination notice arrived at his office. I was confirming a vendor delivery for our first major event. I let it go to voicemail twice. His 3rd message was tight and carefully controlled, the way his voice got when he was furious and trying not to sound it. He said the Harmon Group had cited service flexibility and pricing concerns. He said he knew I was behind it and that what I was doing was disloyal and potentially illegal. I had my attorney draft a response that same afternoon. The letter noted politely that I had not violated any non-compete agreement because no such agreement had ever been offered to me in 22 years of employment. I had simply applied my own professional knowledge and relationships to build a competing business, which was entirely lawful. My father did not call again after that letter arrived. Emma did. She said I had declared war on the family. I said the war had been declared the night they opened my jewelry box. She said I sounded cold. That sounded like someone finally hearing her own thoughts clearly for the first time in decades. She hung up. I went back to work. Pause right here and comment below. Tell me honestly, was Nora wrong to fight back? What would you have done in her exact shoes? I want to know what you think. The second major account to leave Whitmore was a wedding venue partnership called Laurel Hall. I had personally managed that relationship for 5 years. The venue coordinator Diane had once told me I was the only person from Whitmore she genuinely enjoyed working with. I reached out in my 2nd month of operation and was completely honest with her. I told her I had started my own company with more flexible terms and a dedicated account manager, and that I wanted to earn her business on merit. She asked for a proposal. I sent one the next day. Within 2 weeks, Laurel Hall had moved its preferred vendor contract to clean slate. Back at Whitmore, real strain was showing fast. Without me managing daily operations, small cracks were widening into serious problems. Staff scheduling collapsed in week 3 after my departure. A major corporate event was severely understaffed and the client submitted a formal written complaint. My father hired a replacement operations manager named Carl, who had solid experience but no existing relationships with the Whitmore client base or vendor network. Rebuilding those relationships from scratch while the business kept losing accounts was, from what I heard through Patrice's contacts, an absolute nightmare unfolding in slow motion. My mother sent me a text in mid-March saying the business was struggling and she hoped I was satisfied. I read the message carefully, put the phone down, and got back to work. Because something was about to surface that even I had not anticipated. Emma's wedding was in April. I chose not to attend, not out of spite but out of genuine self-preservation. But here is what I was told by 3 separate people afterward. The wedding catering was a disaster. My father had insisted on handling it personally through Whitmore as a gift to Emma. What he did not account for was that the operational infrastructure I had spent years building had largely collapsed since my departure. The main course arrived 40 minutes late. 2 dietary restriction orders were filled incorrectly. The wedding cake sat in direct sunlight for nearly an hour because of a scheduling error. Several guests left before the reception ended. Emma, according to a venue staff member who later told Patrice everything, cried for 40 minutes in the bridal suite. Not happy tears. Marcus was seen standing outside the venue alone on his phone for a long period during his own wedding reception. The wedding my parents had reorganized our entire family around. The wedding for which they had stripped me of my grandmother's ring had been catered by the business that ring was supposed to celebrate, and it had become a public humiliation in front of their own guests. Are you watching this at night? Is anyone else in the room with you right now? Because I want you to really think about this for a moment. The universe has a very specific sense of timing, and you absolutely could not have scripted what happened next if you tried. By May, Clean Slate had 7 active accounts, 4 coming directly from Whitmore's client roster. The business was growing steadily, profitable from month 2, and I was sleeping better than I had in 20 years. My father had hired 2 additional people to replace the functions I had previously handled alone, paying both of them more than he had ever paid me. Patrice heard this from a former Whitmore colleague and told me over lunch. I noted it without surprise and moved on. Whitmore was showing public strain by June. A local business publication mentioned it in the context of operators navigating increased regional competition. The timing was obvious to anyone paying close attention. My father called me again in June, but the tone was completely different. The familiar tightness was gone. There was something underneath it I had not heard from him in a very long time. Uncertainty. He said the business was going through a difficult period and that he wanted to talk. I asked whether he was calling to apologize or to ask for help. A long pause followed. Then he said he was calling to talk. I told him I would think about whether I wanted to do that. I did not say yes. I did not say no. I told Patrice about the call that afternoon and she asked what I was going to do. I said I was not certain yet, but I had a feeling the truth was about to show itself whether I was ready or not. Here is where the story takes a turn I was not fully prepared for. A woman named Beverly called my office in late June. She was 62, recently retired, and had been Whitmore's bookkeeper for 11 years before leaving the previous year, officially due to health reasons. The real reason was a serious disagreement with my father over the accuracy of the company's financial records. Beverly said she had been watching from the outside and there was something I needed to know. We met at a coffee shop that Thursday. She brought a folder. Inside were copies of payroll records, tax filings, and internal compensation documents covering a 7-year period. She showed me, line by line, the system my father had used to classify me as an independent contractor rather than a full employee. That classification had saved the company a significant amount in payroll taxes and benefits costs. It had also allowed him to deny me overtime protections, health contributions, and retirement benefits I would have been legally entitled to as a proper employee. The total underpayment, accurately calculated, was not $68,000. Beverly's figures put it closer to $112,000 across 7 years. Then she slid a second folder across the table. In it were names and contact details of 2 other former Whitmore employees who had been similarly misclassified across the same period. She looked at me steadily over her coffee cup. I thought you should know exactly what you were owed, she said quietly. I spent a full week with an employment attorney named Patrick. We went through Beverly's documents line by line and he confirmed everything she had told me. The misclassification was real, thoroughly documented, and I had a legitimate legal claim with strong supporting evidence. Patrick also raised something I had not considered. Because my father had applied the same misclassification to multiple employees and sustained it over multiple years, the exposure was not limited to civil claims alone. Depending on how the tax filings had been handled, there could be regulatory review as well. What I chose was not a lawsuit, not immediately. Instead, I sent my father a certified letter through Patrick's office outlining the misclassification clearly, the full calculated underpayment, and the documentation assembled behind it. It invited the company to engage in a confidential resolution process within 30 days. It was careful, specific, and absolutely impossible to dismiss. My father received it on a Wednesday. By Thursday evening, my mother had called me 4 times. By Friday morning, Emma had called twice. Neither my father nor any Whitmore attorney responded within the requested window. What happened instead was that Marcus called me on a quiet Sunday evening. His voice was measured and calm. He said he was sorry things had reached this point. And then he said something that stopped me cold. He told me he had been seriously considering pulling his personal investment from the family business for months, and that my letter had made the decision considerably easier. Marcus had made a quiet personal investment in Whitmore Family Catering 18 months before the engagement. It was modest relative to his portfolio but gave him a formal stake and a seat during major decisions. He had not been active in that role, mostly deferring to my father, but he had been watching. He told me that Sunday that what he had observed over the previous 8 months, the operational failures, the account losses, the staffing instability, the legal letter had convinced him the business was no longer viable. He withdrew his investment the following week, quietly and completely. My parents did not tell Emma right away. She found out when she asked Marcus about a joint financial plan, and he mentioned the Whitmore stake was no longer part of his portfolio. The argument that followed was, according to someone nearby, significant and prolonged. Emma called me that night. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Her voice was not the familiar sharp one she used with me. It held something closer to genuine confusion. She said she did not understand why everything was falling apart. She said it felt like the ground was moving under her feet. I listened to that message twice. I felt something real for her in that moment. Not enough to stop what was already in motion, but something real and human, because that ground had been moving for a very long time. The only question was who had finally decided to notice. In September, a man named Derek walked into my office. Derek had been my father's head chef at Whitmore for 8 years. Talented, meticulous, the primary reason food quality had stayed consistently high for so long. He had been let go 2 months earlier in what my father called a cost-cutting measure. What it actually was, according to Derek, was retaliation. He had submitted a formal written safety complaint about the kitchen. 1 week later, he was terminated without cause. He brought documentation. The safety complaint with its timestamp, the termination timeline, the notice itself. But he also brought something else entirely. During 8 years at Whitmore, he had kept personal handwritten logs, detailed records of events where premium ingredients had been substituted for standard grade product without any client disclosure. Clients who paid for top quality produce receiving something considerably less. It was not massive fraud, but it was consistent, deliberate, and documented over multiple years. I connected Derek with Patrick and suggested he consult independently about his wrongful termination claim. I also offered him a position at Clean Slate, which he accepted on the spot. Then I sat quietly with what he had shared and added it to the folder, growing thicker every week. Somewhere in all of this, I could feel the end approaching, like the sound of a large truck coming around a bend before you can see the headlights. Are you still with me? Do not go anywhere, because this next part is where everything finally lands. October arrived and the family business filled for a small business financial review with their bank. In a community our size, those things do not stay private for long. Beverly heard it through former banking contacts and called me that same afternoon. My father had been drawing on a line of credit for months to cover growing operating shortfalls. The combination of major account losses, operational failures, replacement staffing costs, and Marcus's full withdrawal had eroded the margin that kept Whitmore solvent month to month. It was not yet a bankruptcy filing, but it was the step before one, and anyone with business experience could read exactly where it was heading. My mother called me the same week. She did not lead with guilt this time. She led with raw desperation, which was somehow harder to hear. She said they might lose the entire business. She said they had put everything they had into it for 26 years. She asked if there was anything at all I could do to help. I sat in the quiet of my kitchen for a long moment and thought about 22 years. I thought about a little girl holding her grandmother's hand, being told she would inherit a ring. I thought about an empty jewelry box opened on a Tuesday afternoon. I thought about 6 words. Emma needed it. For the engagement. I told my mother gently that I did not think there was anything I could do. By November, the bank review had fully escalated. The attorney representing Whitmore contacted Patrick about settling my wage claim. The first offer was deeply insulting, $20,000 plus a non-disclosure agreement permanently preventing me from speaking publicly about what had happened. I declined without hesitation. Patrick countered with a significantly higher figure and conditions that did not include any NDA. My father rejected the counter. Patrick made clear we were fully prepared to pursue the matter through the State Labor Board, which would create an official public record and likely trigger a broader regulatory review covering multiple employees. There was a 2-week pause in negotiations. During those 2 weeks, Emma called me. It was the most civil conversation we had shared in over a year. She said she understood now that things had not been fair to me. She said she genuinely had not known about the payroll situation, and I believed her. Emma had simply never questioned a structure that always worked in her favor. She asked whether there was any path forward between us. I told her I genuinely hoped so. But before any real conversation could happen, certain things had to be honestly acknowledged, and certain things had to actually change. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "You mean the ring?" I said, "Yes." Among other things, I heard her exhale slowly. The kind that seals slowly. The kind that sounds like someone finally setting down something very heavy. I waited, but the story was far from over. What happened next? I did not plan and could not have predicted. Emma and Marcus hit a serious rough patch in November. From what 2 people close to both of them shared, the trouble had been building quietly since the disastrous April wedding. Marcus was a careful man who had married, Emma expecting a true equal partner. What he had increasingly encountered was someone who could not sit with discomfort before turning it outward onto whoever was closest. The financial stress surrounding the Whitmore situation had been particularly damaging because it exposed differences they had papered over during easier times. Helen had seen it, I realized. She had seen all of it from the very beginning, which was a large part of why she had made the decision she made. In December, Marcus and Emma separated. Temporarily, they both said, "Not a divorce, just space." Emma moved back into our parents' house. That house was now carrying enormous financial pressure and real fear. My father had aged visibly in every photograph I had seen through mutual acquaintances in recent months. And Emma, who had spent every year of her life at the absolute center of the family's attention, was now living in a house full of people with no reserves left to give anyone. For the first time in her life, Emma was sitting in the exact chair I had occupied for 40 years. I thought about calling her. I thought about it for 3 days. My attorney Patrick called on a Thursday morning, his voice measured and deliberate in the way it got when news was significant. Whitmore Family Catering had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy protection the previous afternoon. Full liquidation. All business assets, equipment, contracts, and intellectual property would be assessed and sold to satisfy outstanding creditors. The filing had cleared the court's public record system and was now official. I sat down and let that settle over me for a quiet moment. 26 years. My father had started that business when I was a teenager standing in our home kitchen. I had given the better part of my adult life to keeping it alive. It was not a simple feeling. I will not pretend otherwise. There was real grief mixed in. Grief for the years, for earlier versions of my family before everything fractured, for the dream my father had carried that had now reached this particular end. But grief and regret are 2 entirely different things. I did not regret leaving. I did not regret building clean slate. I did not regret protecting what I had honestly been owed. Patrick then told me that as part of the full liquidation, all physical business assets would go to public auction. Equipment, furniture, supplies, and any property held as collateral against outstanding loans. My grandmother's ring had been pledged as collateral against a small business loan my parents had taken out the previous spring. It would be at the auction. The estate auction was held on a gray Saturday morning in February at a warehouse near the edge of town. I arrived early. I wore a navy coat and low heels and carried my coffee in a travel mug like it was any ordinary Saturday. I signed in at the registration desk, received my bidder number, and took a seat in the 3rd row from the front. I had considered the back where I would be less visible. Then I decided no, front row. Let them see me clearly if they came. They came. My parents arrived together about 20 minutes after I did. My mother saw me first and stopped mid-step. My father followed her gaze across the room. He looked older than the last time I had seen him in person. The certainty that had always lived in the set of his jaw was simply gone. Emma was not with them. The auction moved through items steadily. Office furniture, kitchen equipment, supply inventories, numbers, paddles, and the auctioneer's practiced voice working through a long list. Then came Lot 47. One antique engagement ring, rose gold setting, small diamond solitaire, estimated early 1940s manufacture, good condition. Starting bid $25. I raised my paddle immediately. A long pause filled the room. No counter bid. The auctioneer glanced slowly around. My father sat perfectly still. My mother had one hand pressed over her mouth. Going once, going twice, sold for $50 to bidder 31. After the auction, I sat in my car for a long while. I opened the small paper envelope and held my grandmother's ring in my palm. It was smaller than I remembered from childhood. Rose gold, worn smooth in places from decades of wear. A diamond so modest you had to catch the light at exactly the right angle to truly see it spark. But it was real, in every sense of that word. The weight of it, the history inside it, the fact that my grandmother had chosen this ring for a little girl with no idea yet how complicated the years ahead would be. I slipped it onto my right hand. It fit perfectly. I sat there a while longer. Then I called Patrice. She answered on the second ring. I told her I had the ring back. She was quiet a moment and then said, "Good. Now go home and rest." I drove home, made tea, and sat on my couch looking at the ring on my hand until the light changed in the window. My mother texted that evening. She said she had seen me at the auction and was sorry, that she knew sorry was not enough, but she did not know what else to say. I read the message twice. I was not ready to respond. What I was ready to do was put the phone down, drink my tea in the quiet, and sit inside an apartment that was entirely mine, wearing a ring that had always been meant for me. It is 14 months since the auction. Clean Slate has 12 full-time employees, 18 active accounts, and a second location under build-out. Patrice is my operations director. Derek is my head chef. Beverly works part-time in finance. My wage claim settled for $94,000 with no NDA. My father has retired. He and my mother moved across town. We speak occasionally. It is careful and short. There is still distance between us, but there is contact. Emma and Marcus reconciled in the spring. Emma and I are not close. I do not know if we ever will be. But we shared a lunch in November that lasted 2 hours and ended without anger, and that felt like real progress. She did not ask for either ring. I wear my grandmother's ring on my right hand every single day. Helen's ring sits in its velvet pouch on my nightstand. I'm not ready to decide its future yet. I am allowed to take my time with it. Here is what I want to leave with you tonight. Toxic family systems do not survive on cruelty alone. They survive on someone being willing to disappear. The moment I stopped disappearing, the system could not hold together. I am Nora, not a backup plan, not a utility, not the forgotten daughter. I am the one who rebuilt her life from scratch and bought back her grandmother's ring for $50. Share this tonight with one person who needs to hear it.